There was a time in America when a woman could open her closet and find in 3 or 4 dresses everything she needed for an entire week. Morning, afternoon, evening. There was a dress for each hour, and each one was built to last. Today we're going to talk about those dresses, the ones that were so well made, so thoughtfully designed, that they could be worn season after season without ever looking wrong. Dresses that were genuinely timeless, and then, quietly, disappeared. So if you've ever looked at an old photograph of your mother or your grandmother and thought, she looked so put together, so graceful, today's video is for you. Because we're going back to the 1950s, when American women dressed not to impress, but to belong to themselves. Let's start with the most important thing to understand about women's clothing in the 1950s. Dresses weren't a choice, they weren't a statement. They weren't something a woman put on because she was feeling creative or following a trend. Dresses were simply how women got dressed. They wore them the way we wear jeans today, automatically, naturally, without a second thought. And in that simplicity, there was a kind of wisdom that we've mostly forgotten. The decade itself was one of enormous change. The war was over. Men had come home. Families were being built in places that hadn't existed 5 years before. Little houses with little lawns and long, quiet streets where children rode bicycles until dinner was called. The American woman of the 1950s was building something. A home, a life, a rhythm. And her wardrobe was part of that rhythm, as reliable and comforting as the coffee percolating on the stove at 7 in the morning. Now when we look back at those dresses, really look at them, what strikes you isn't the glamour, it's the practicality wrapped inside the elegance. These were clothes made to move in, to work in, to cook dinner and answer the door, and walk to the corner store and sit down to a Sunday meal, all in the same garment. They were designed with the real shape of a woman's day in mind, and they were built to last. Not for a season, not until the next trend came along, for years. That's what we've lost, more than anything else. The shirtwaist dress. Let's begin with the dress that defined the decade more than any other. If you looked inside the closet of almost any American woman between 1950 and 1965, regardless of her city, her income, or her age, you would find at least one of these, probably more. The shirtwaist dress was exactly what the name suggests. A dress with a bodice that buttoned down the front like a shirt, fitted through the torso, nipped at the waist, and opening into a full, gently flared skirt that fell somewhere between the knee and the mid-calf. It was the spiritual descendant of the working women's dress from decades before, refined now into something softer, more feminine, more settled. Picture it, a Tuesday morning in Ohio, somewhere around 1954. The kitchen smells like toast and percolated coffee. A woman is standing at the counter with her hair already set from the night before, and she's wearing a cotton shirtwaist in a small blue gingham print. The collar is white, the buttons are white, and there's a thin belt at the waist, the same fabric as the dress, cinching everything into a silhouette that is entirely composed without being the least bit fussy. She's not dressed up. She's just dressed. That dress probably came from Sears, or from JCPenney, or maybe from the fabric counter at Woolworths, where she picked out the gingham herself and spent a Saturday afternoon at the sewing machine making it. Either way, it cost somewhere between $3 and $7, which in today's money sits around $30 to $60, and it would last her, if she cared for it properly, for 5 years or more. It was cotton, which meant it was washable. It was structured, which meant it held its shape. And it was simple enough in its design that it never quite went out of fashion, which meant she could wear it in 1954 and again in 1959 without anyone thinking anything of it. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. The shirtwaist dress worked because it understood the geometry of a woman's real day. The full skirt gave room to move, to bend, to kneel, to climb stairs, to sit down without restriction. The fitted bodice said, "I took care of myself this morning." The belt said, "I have a shape and I'm not hiding it." And the cotton said, "I'm practical. I live in the real world." Women wore this dress in gingham and plaid for mornings at home. They wore it in small florals for afternoon errands. They wore it in solid pastel, pale pink, butter yellow, sky blue, to church luncheons and garden parties. The same silhouette, the same construction, the same faithful cut. They changed the fabric, the color, the print, and the dress transformed accordingly. It was in the truest sense a wardrobe in a single garment. Today the shirtwaist exists only in fragments. You can find approximations of it, a button front dress here, a midi dress with a belted waist there, but they're rarely made of cotton, rarely built to last and rarely designed with the intelligence of that original cut. We've forgotten how to make a dress that works for all day. We make dresses for moments now, for photographs, for outings, for occasions that have a beginning and an end. The shirtwaist dress was made for the whole ordinary, continuous, beautiful length of a woman's day. The swing dress. If the shirtwaist was the workhorse of the decade, the swing dress was its Sunday best. But here's what people misunderstand about the swing dress. It wasn't only for special occasions. It wasn't the party dress women took out of the cedar closet 3 times a year and otherwise left hanging in the dark. For many women, the swing dress was Tuesday. It was grocery shopping. It was meeting a friend for lunch downtown. It was picking up the children from school. The silhouette was simple, fitted through the bodice, always, with a waist that was clearly defined, cinched either by the cut of the fabric or a thin belt or both. And then from the waist, the skirt opened into a wide, circular shape, sometimes supported by 1 or 2 cotton or nylon petticoats underneath that swayed gently with every step. There was something about that movement, the way a full skirt moved when a woman walked across a room. There was a softness to it, a femininity that wasn't performed, wasn't self-conscious. It was simply the natural consequence of a well-made garment responding to a body in motion. Christian Dior had introduced this silhouette to the world in 1947 with what he called the New Look, an answer to the austerity of the war years, a return to a fullness and elegance that fabric rationing had made impossible for nearly a decade. American women adopted it immediately and completely. By 1950, the full-skirted silhouette wasn't high fashion anymore. It was just fashion. It was the shape of a woman's dress, the way oval was the shape of a dining table. The fabrics ranged beautifully. Cotton lawn for summer dresses, light as tissue with tiny florals in rose and white and yellow, wool crepe for fall and winter, in deep jewel tones, burgundy, forest green, navy, silk shantung for special dinners, rayon and acetate blends for the middle of the week. Each fabric told a different story about the dress, about the occasion, about the woman inside it, and the prints were a world of their own. Polka dots in red and white, in black and white, in turquoise and cream, large cabbage roses on a pale background, small geometric prints that suggested something modern and optimistic, novelty prints, cherries, leaves, tiny bows that made the dress feel playful without sacrificing its fundamental elegance. A woman in 1955 might have 3 or 4 swing dresses in rotation, one for summer days, one for cooler weather, one perhaps in black for evenings out. She'd wear each one dozens of times without feeling repetitive, because she understood something we seem to have forgotten. A dress that fits well and is made of quality fabric never gets old. Only our relationship to it changes, and that's a relationship worth tending. The pencil dress. If the shirtwaist was the morning dress and the swing dress was the afternoon dress, the pencil dress, also called the sheath dress or the wiggle dress, depending on how fitted it was the dress of intention. You wore a pencil dress when you were going somewhere that mattered, not necessarily a formal occasion, but somewhere where you wanted to feel a certain way, in control, precise, feminine in a way that was less about softness and more about strength. The silhouette was the opposite of the swing dress in almost every dimension. Where the swing opened and moved and floated, the pencil was contained. It followed the body from shoulder to knee, or mid-calf, in the longer versions, in one clean, unbroken line. The waist was still defined because in the 1950s, the waist was always defined, but the skirt didn't escape into fullness. It stayed close, tapering slightly toward the hem, sometimes with a small kick pleat at the back to allow for walking. It was frankly a glamorous dress. There's no other word for it. Women who wore pencil dresses moved differently in them. Smaller steps, a particular kind of composed, deliberate walk that is almost entirely absent from modern life. You couldn't rush in a pencil dress. You couldn't run. You could only move with a measured, intentional grace. And for certain women, certain mornings, that was exactly what they needed. City women loved the pencil dress. Working women, the ones who had stayed in the workforce after the war, who sat behind office desks and answered telephones and managed filing systems and kept entire businesses organized, understood intuitively that the pencil dress